So now we come to ladder creation. And this is related to what we've recently been talking about under this sort of small category of phenomenological problem solving. So we've talked about state and situation variety, and we've talked about trap escape skills. And really these two ideas, or these two intangible assets, do go together with ladder creation. So ladder creation is just simply a way of you creating for yourself multiple steps that lead to a better consciousness. So if you can create a ladder to a higher consciousness, then that is ladder creation. And it's simply something that is multiple steps that you follow through. You do one step, and then that leads to the next step, and then that leads to the next step, and so on and so forth. So there's a directionality to it. The direction is higher consciousness, going up. And there's also a process to it, which is one step has to go before the next and after the next, and so on and so forth. So ladder creation, let's look at some examples. Phenomenological problem solving would include ladder creation. For example, better thinking. It's quite strange that if you think about how to think better, you will come up with a way of thinking better. You will think your way out of bad thinking. That's an example of ladder creation. And that will be a multi-step process. We could even call it a rational reasoning, or a reasoning that occurs within you. It'll be a string of thoughts. It won't just be one thought. Here's another example. Realization. So having the experience of realizing something is actually a process. You come to realize something after a process of contemplation, a process of introspection, a process of culminating insights from perception dynamics. So that's an example of ladder creation, realization. Clearer seeing is another example, and perception in general. Can you create a process by which your seeing gains clarity? That is actually a step-by-step process that occurs for you subjectively. And in fact, now is probably a good time for me to mention that I do also have the Doster method, which is exactly a ladder creation of consciousness through perception that begins with sight, seeing things more clearly. More relaxation, that's an example of ladder creation. Do you know what you need to do, the steps that you need to take to become more relaxed? Relaxation is a very good example for ladder creation, because it's not something you do just once. It's something you go back to again and again, and it has a varying degree of depth. You become more and more relaxed as you become more and more conscious. Now, of course, to say it like that, it's a bit crude, right? It's not exactly relaxation and consciousness in that kind of direct relation. It's a bit crude to say it like that. It's a bit clumsy with the words. But essentially, the mechanism is there in relaxation. Expansion requires ladder creation. Now, we've talked about expansion in many different ways. In order for you to expand in a certain field or plane or component of your phenomenological experiencing, You have to create a ladder process. Expand your thinking, expand your feeling, and so on. Omnipresence. Omnipresence requires ladder creation, right? So you remember the example I gave of omnipresence, where I said you can listen to the sound of my voice, and that might be the only thing you're listening to, but then you can also listen to the ambience of wherever you are. So right now I can hear a tractor or some traffic. So if I'm listening to the traffic and the sound of my voice, my awareness has gone somewhere else that is slightly more omnipresent than it was when I was just listening to the sound of my voice. And then I can expand that omnipresence more by not just listening to the tractor, but also the other sound that's in the other room and the neighbor that's banging and making some noise. They might be telling me to be quiet because I'm yelling so much. Right? This is a ladder. It's a step-by-step process that takes me into omnipresence through auditory perception, through listening. And of course, you can do it with multiple perceptions and multiple components, right? Omnipresence is through awareness out to the entire cosmos, step by step, right? Omnipresence is a step-by-step process. You need a ladder for it. So that's an example. Immortality. So we haven't said too much about immortality, but immortality requires ladder creation. If you accept something as dead, you realize how it is alive. If you accept something as ending, you can see more clearly how it is a continuation. And immortality is achieved through incrementally taking on small acceptances, accepting the end of the different parts of you, and ultimately accepting the end of you, accepting your death. When you accept your death, then you become immortal. And of course, there are varying degrees to that. And the varying degrees is worked on via the incremental points in a ladder that you climb up. Developmental psychology. That's an example of ladder creation, right? When we learn developmental psychology, spiral dynamics, Jean Gebser, Jean Piaget, right? Piaget, or Jean-Paul Sartre, I'm trying to say. I'm getting my philosophy and psychology mixed up now. That's not very good. But whatever model it is, that's an example of ladder creation, right? Each rung on the ladder could be a paradigm, which is an entire collection of perspectives and values and self-scripts and buzzwords. And yet, when you understand a developmental psychology map, then you have that ladder to go through. And you invariably start naturally going through it when you really grasp a developmental psychology map. So here's another example, the 12-step program. So Alcoholics Anonymous created this 12-step program for overcoming addiction to alcohol. And we mentioned addiction in trap escape skills. So you see how these are related, right? When you're stuck in a trap, you need to find a way out. In fact, we could even say, if we wanted to, am I really doing this? Okay, I'm doing this just because we're using words to describe things. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do this just for the sake of talking in an old-fashioned way. we can say that trap escape skills is on one spectrum of consciousness and ladder creation is on another side of the spectrum of consciousness. And you go from being in a trap, working your way out of a trap, all the way through ladder creation to higher levels of consciousness. Now, of course, when I say that, it sounds so old-fashioned. So I apologize for that. But at least, these words work and the idea works. Your personal routine can be a ladder creation. So you can create a personal routine. On day 1, I'm going to do 20 sit-ups. On day 2, I'm going to do 25 sit-ups. On day 3, I'm going to do 30 sit-ups. On day 4, I'm probably going to be tired, so I'm going to have no sit-ups. It'll be a rest day, and so on and so forth. And you can do it for sit-ups. You can do it for your push-ups. You can do it for your chin-ups. And you can do it for all of your exercises. That's an example of ladder creation. And then the last example I've got on my list of examples is awareness intensive groups. So awareness intensive group is where you work on your consciousness in a group of people and you use multiple techniques, right? You draw a number of different techniques. And a ladder creation, an awareness intensive is a ladder creation, right? It's like, okay, first we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then you're going to talk about this, then we're going to do some emotional work, and then it's going to be psychological work, and then it's going to be relational, and then you're going to do this sort of perception technique. And it's a process, right? You go from different levels down and then up. And in fact, a lot of awareness intensives have a ladder creation arc that actually starts out and goes down and then up. So you actually go into the traps that you're stuck in. And then you learn the trap escape skills, and then that brings you up to a point, and then you have ladder creation skills that takes you to a higher consciousness. So awareness intensive groups is a very powerful way of getting in touch with this intangible asset of ladder creation. And eventually, when you've done enough groups, you actually learn how to create your own ladders. You create your own. Doesn't mean necessarily creating your own groups. It means creating it subjectively for you in yourself. So those are a few examples. And when you're ready, we will move on to the next talk. I believe the next talk will also be part of a new section. So you can click on that when you're ready.